Hello and welcome to an Our Fake History digital short. Today we're talking about weird 18th century British bad boy clubs. Roll the theme. Hey everyone, my name is Sebastian Major and I'm the host of Our Fake History, the podcast where we explore historical myths and try to determine what's fact, what's fiction, and what is such a good story that it simply must be told. Here on the digital shorts, I like to take a little something that we've been exploring on the longer audio podcasts and serve it in a more bite-sized video package. On the main podcast, we have been exploring the so-called Hellfire Clubs of 18th century Britain. These were elite social clubs whose membership included dukes, earls, members of parliament, and other well-to-do aristocrats. However, these clubs soon became the cause of much scandal as rumors started to circulate that members burned brimstone while they cursed, gambled, participated in orgies, and, most seriously, mocked the Christian faith. Now, given the secretive nature of these groups, finding reliable information on what actually went on inside them is famously hard to do. This is compounded by the fact that these clubs flourished during an era when Britain's print culture was particularly salacious, scandal-hungry, and prone to hoaxes and literary pranks. The early 18th century saw the birth of some of the first English newspapers, and pamphlet culture was still going strong. This was also the era of the so-called Grub Street writers. That was a proliferation of hacks writing cheaply produced, liberally plagiarized, and poorly researched articles, biographies, and books of every description. Much of our information about the Hellfire Clubs comes from these hack writers. Further, the sensationalist press of the day could sometimes create or fan the flames of moral panics. In this video, I want to explore the so-called Mohawk scare of 1712. The Mohawk Gang is sometimes seen as a precursor to the Hellfire Clubs, and their story can help put the whole Hellfire phenomenon in context. In 1712, there were a number of people who were attacked on the streets of London by young men identified as aristocrats. Soon, the papers were attributing these attacks to a hedonistic street gang that they were calling the Mohawks. In March of 1712, the newspaper, the London Spectator, would claim that there was a, quote, nocturnal fraternity under the name the Mohawk Club, a name borrowed from a sort of cannibal in India. The president is styled the Emperor of the Mohawks, and his arms are a Turkish crescent engraven upon his forehead. To join the club, all one needed to do was drink beyond, quote, reason and humanity, end quote. But most shockingly, the favorite pastime of this club was random acts of violence. The Spectator reported that the Mohawks set upon any unfortunate soul who just happened to cross their path, writing, quote, some are knocked down, others stabbed, cut, and carbonated. The article also described nasty attacks with weird nicknames, like tipping the lion, where an attacker squashed their victim's nose while poking out their eyes, or the tumblers, where women were targeted, grabbed, and then literally set on their heads. This article and others like it created a real panic in London that lasted for at least a few months. The English satirist Jonathan Swift, author of Gulliver's Travels, would write in his diary that he took to hurrying home early in those days so he didn't encounter the Mohawks that he had heard so much about. Notably, he never did. Before the year was out, the notorious gang even became the subject of a play called, appropriately, The Mohawks. The playwright even imagined an initiation ceremony where the drunken club members would sing, quote, come fill up your glass, round, round let it pass, till our reason be lost in wine. Now, it's clear that in 1712, there was an uptick in street violence in London. There are many substantiated reports of people who were attacked by drunken men. There were also a handful of young men arrested that March for assaulting fellow Londoners. Some of these men were aristocrats, like Lord Hitchingbrook, the son of the Earl of Sandwich. The London Gazette would identify these men as members of the Mohawk Gang. But as historian Evelyn Lord has pointed out, quote, the attackers were not necessarily members of the Mohawk Gang, and none of the defendants could identify any of those accused who appeared in court. Now, this doesn't mean that these drunken aristocrats didn't hurt these people, as some of them were convicted. The attacks were real, but the colorful story of the Mohawk Gang, with a president with a crescent carved into his forehead, may have likely been made up or heavily embellished by the papers. You see, while the London Spectator wrongly claimed that the name Mohawk had come from India, it had actually come from a group of Iroquois visitors who had been in London 2 years previously. 3 of these men were indeed Haudenosaunee Mohawk people. At the time, one of these leaders was somewhat incorrectly identified in the London papers as the Emperor of the Mohawks. So, either this group of aristocratic street thugs purposefully styled themselves as Mohawks in imitation of these Iroquois visitors, or the London papers used the Mohawk label because it was a name that Londoners were already familiar with. It was also a name that many Londoners associated quite unfairly with barbarity and savagery, thanks to 18th century stereotypes about indigenous people. The fact that the alleged leader of this gang was styled the Emperor of the Mohawks suggests that whoever came up with that title was at least reading the London papers, if not writing them. It's highly likely that while drunken noblemen were making a game out of assaulting people on the streets of London, there may have never been an organized Mohawk gang. To find out more about the Hellfire Clubs and hundreds of other historical myths, like and subscribe to this YouTube channel, and subscribe to the audio version of the Our Fake History podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.